I wanted to write a book that if I had picked it up a year before I left to travel, feeling like utterly terrified and thinking that I was crazy and ungrateful for the things I had and that I was destroying my life and all of the many, many negative thoughts that went through my head, I wanted to write a book that showed people that that wasn't true. But I also wanted to write a book that was real. I wanted people to know that it is tough. It's tough to follow your dreams, whatever they are. I mean, for me, it was traveling, but that it wasn't a cakewalk. You know, there were a ton of hard times. There were, in fact, like the hardest times because I was, for the first time in my life, really confronting the person that I really wanted to be.
Kim Dinan's idea to take a 1-year break to travel and write turned into a whole new life and profession. Before her leap, she was married, owned a house, and was working as a sustainability coordinator for the city in Portland, Oregon, when she realized she wanted something totally different for her life. She managed to get her husband on board with the crazy idea to totally shake things up and set off to travel. They ended up selling their house and traveled for several years, a life-changing experience that Kim wrote about in both a blog and a memoir. The memoir, called The Yellow Envelope, was published last year. In this conversation, we talk about how Kim set out on this journey with the intention to travel the world and become a professional writer, how she made them both happen, and what she learned along the way. I'm Lisa Hoashi, and this is Leap Like Me, the show about the leaps people take to make the most of this amazing life. Hello, Kim, and welcome to the show.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
So you published a memoir about your sabbatical called The Yellow Envelope. Can you start by telling us a little bit about your book?
Yeah, my book is really the story of this transformative experience of quitting my job and selling all of my stuff and traveling the world with my husband for what turned out to be 3 years. But the book kind of chronicles a gift that was given to my husband and I, like a going away present before we left. It was a yellow envelope. And then inside the envelope, there was a check and instructions to give the money away as we traveled. So the story is not only about this emotional journey for me as I changed my life and set off, into the world, but it's also a story about who we met and who we gave the money to along the way and the transformative power of giving.
And what really prompted the journey for you?
Well, I had always wanted to travel. I mean, I didn't grow up traveling. My parents have never left the country. But for some reason, I just had this sense of wanderlust, even though I didn't really get to express it in any way. But I didn't really have the financial means to travel, when I was like younger and in college and when I saw a lot of my friends traveling. And so it was kind of a dream that I set on the back burner because I graduated and I took a job and, then I kind of kept taking different jobs and had followed this really traditional life path, bought a house and got married and yada, yada, yada. And I realized one day, I think as I was sitting in my cubicle, daydreaming of the things that I had wanted to do when I was younger with like traveling and also writing, I realized that 2 weeks or 3 weeks of vacation was never going to be enough. And if I was really serious about doing this thing, that I would have to, take this massive leap and leave my job and kind of set out into the world. And it seemed like the wildest, craziest idea that anyone had ever had. I thought that I was kind of the first one to make this up before I started Googling it. And so, it was really that feeling of knowing that although I was terrified, if I didn't pursue this thing that I had always wanted to do, that it was probably never going to happen. And what did that mean for my life if I didn't do that?
And since you've written a book, I know as a writer as well that you have to really think about your story and think about all the things that went into it. What do you think, like on a very fundamental level, that you really wanted out of this?
I wanted to write a book that people could relate to on some level. I mean, I wanted to write a book that if I had picked it up a year before I left to travel, feeling like utterly terrified and thinking that I was crazy and ungrateful for the things I had and that I was destroying my life and all of the many, many negative thoughts that went through my head. I wanted to write a book that showed people that that wasn't true. But I also wanted to write a book that was real. I wanted people to know that it is tough. It's tough to follow your dreams, whatever they are. I mean, for me, it was traveling, but that it wasn't a cakewalk. You know, there were a ton of hard times. There were, in fact, like the hardest times because I was, for the first time in my life, really confronting the person that I really wanted to be and becoming that person. And change isn't easy in any way. So I wanted people to also know that it's possible to do what you really want to do. And asterisk next to it, be prepared because it's not going to be super easy right away. It's going to be really hard. And, eventually I think you'll come out the other side of it. But I don't think anyone sort of goes off on a journey like this and just skates through it.
So what was sort of the skeleton plan of your journey when you guys set out?
Well, I think we were both so scared to do it that I think that we were always bargaining with ourselves. At first, it was like, well, we'll try to take a sabbatical, see if our jobs will let us come back. And then it was like, well, we'll go for 1 year. And then it eventually sort of became, well, if we're going to sort of give all of this up, this life that we have now, then let's leave this open-ended and kind of see what happens in life. And so that kind of became the plan was, okay, well, we'll travel either until we hate it or until the money runs out, kind of whatever happens first.
And how did you guys deal with some of those logistics like money and what you would do? You said you owned a house, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, we started saving everything. I mean, we had been married 2007 and we left in 2012. So we had spent like this year of our lives before we were married doing nothing and saving up for the wedding. So I feel like we had good practice. And so we kind of employed all those tactics again. And we didn't go out. We were like the most boring people on the face of the earth. We didn't eat out. We just saved everything that we could. I had this Excel spreadsheet and literally, I mean, if my grandma sent me $10 for my birthday, put it in my savings account. And then I updated my spreadsheet because I wanted, I had this goal that I was working toward and every little bit kind of took me in that direction. And I felt very strongly about it. So it was easy. I mean, in that sense, it took about 3 years of saving up. And yes, we put our house on the market. That was a huge decision for us. We didn't know, should we rent it? What should we do? But I felt really strongly at the time that I needed to kind of let anything happen. Like I needed my entire future to be wide open. And I felt like if we had this house that we would feel drawn back to this place or responsible for something. And just the logistics of it kind of stressed me out. And so one by one, we just started shedding things.
So when you say that you really felt this need for things to be totally wide open, I mean, I can really relate to that. But I was single and I wonder what it was like to do that, to go through that when you had a partner.
I mean, it was not easy because, well, my husband, he wasn't expecting this and it wasn't something that he wanted for, he was perfectly happy with our life. And I think really surprised when he saw how serious I was, that this wasn't just like another one of my ideas, like that this was something that I was really, really serious about and that I was going to do it. It kind of came down to I was going to do it whether he wanted to do it or not. I mean, I felt that strongly about it. So yeah, I mean, that was a challenge. I didn't sit down and give him an ultimatum like that. It never came to that. But, I wondered what would happen if it had. But he decided that he was going to get behind this and he was worried just like I was. But I guess I eventually convinced him to do it. It took a while for him to really come around to it. I always tell people that actually, I mean, you can read about my kind of story and journey in the book and my husband Brian's in there as well. But in reality, he changed more than I did. I mean, at the end of this thing, he grew and changed and is a completely different person, really. And besides that, he's probably has more wanderlust now than I do. So
wow.
Yeah, which I'm sure he never would have expected. No one would have expected it before we left.
So along the way, what were some of the most important things that you learned about yourself?
Oh, that's a great question. I learned so many things. I mean, so many things. It's like, where do you start? On sort of a broader, this isn't necessarily about me, but two big things that I learned on kind of a broader scale was one, like this real true sense of faith in, I don't know what you want to call it, like the universe, God, something that like I used to always feel like if I didn't have control over things, I mean, I use this example of like, if my car broke down, I could call my husband, I could call my friends, I could call AAA. I had 1,000 different ways in which I could deal with that sort of minor situation in my life. But, traveling, if the car breaks down, you have no backup plan. You can't speak the language in a lot of cases. You don't have anyone to call. And so I always envisioned that situation as a disaster. But when I got out on the road and things like that would happen and I had no backup plan and I had no one to call, and either A, I figured it out on my own, or what often happened was a sort of a combo. I figured it out on my own. And, things happen, like it wasn't an utter disaster. I didn't lay down on the street and just die, people came and helped. I figured it out. There was always a solution. And having experienced that over and over and over again, I just realized that that's the way that life works, that I can find myself in a situation that I don't know how to get out of. And that's not a disaster. That's just life. And it's exciting, actually. And that it leads to things that I never, ever could have imagined for myself. So that was one of the big things I learned. Another was the power of money, because I think I had always had a relationship with money that I was always afraid I didn't have enough, that something was going to happen and I wouldn't be prepared, as if I lost my job, what would happen? And it was like, I couldn't accumulate, not that I was accumulating huge wads of money, but that I never felt like enough. And that spending money was really scary for me. I mean, making any kind of huge purchase was like, made me feel sick to my stomach. But once I started traveling and money was coming out of my bank account and it wasn't going back in, and I got over that feeling of like horror of watching that happen, I realized the power, like what money can actually buy you. Like I bought this experience that changed my life and will always make an impact on my life. And that cost me, whatever it cost me, I don't know, $40,000 or something, for a couple of years. But that money, it's worth everything, because my life doesn't look a thing like it looked like before.
Yeah, it was such a powerful experience for you.
Yeah, it was.
So you mentioned that one of your dreams in setting out was one was to travel, obviously, and the other was to write. And now you've published a book. So I wanted to know what things you felt like you did right along the way that helped you become a published author. If people are also setting out on their same journeys and also have sort of creative ambitions, particularly around writing.
I mean, the first thing I did right was believing that this was something that I was meant to do. I had always been a writer ever since I was a kid. It was the thing that made me feel most like me. It was the thing that I felt I was good at, one of the only things I felt that I was good at. And believing that it deserved time, because I wasn't giving it time in my normal life. I was working, I was tired, I was exhausted at the end of the day. And so this trip just gave me time to be a writer in the sense that I just got to stare at a computer and feel my feelings and write things down. And I started a blog. And for me, that was an incredible thing to do for a couple of reasons. I mean, first of all, it gave me a platform to write on. And then eventually it gave me a following of readers. And that eventually morphed into, I think, something that helped me when I was trying to sell my book proposal, because I had a platform, which is extremely important when you're writing nonfiction. But I didn't know that that would lead to that at the time. I just felt drawn to express myself. on, on this little blog. So those were all the things. And I gave myself little gifts that I didn't realize I was giving myself. Like, I kept a journal, and because I just enjoyed it, there were days when I would sit in whatever balcony I was, off the whatever room I was staying in whatever country, and write what I saw or what I smelled or what it sounded like, and really tried to capture the experience of traveling, not because I was thinking that would go into a book someday, but just because it was fun for me. So I don't know. I kind of think of it as I never went to grad school for writing, but in many ways that was sort of my on the ground real world experience, was just allowing myself this time to write and then doing it every single day.
And I do want to point out, especially like with your blog, you did end up creating quite a following. And for a lot of people, that's really hard. What things do you think helped you grow your readership?
It's funny because I don't think that I tried anything. I was never good at marketing and SEO, and that was just never the thing that I focused my energy on. But I think that the reason that people related to my blog is because it was honest, and it was, I consider myself kind of an emotional writer. I think that it was emotional, express the good things and the bad things, although always trying to focus on the better things. But I think that was it, is that it was just fun for people. I started my blog before I left to travel, like a long time before I left to travel, because I needed a place where I could come and just kind of gain the courage to do it, where I could write about saving my money. And then that helped me be more dedicated. And so I think there were some people that started following in the beginning. And again, I'm not really sure how they found the blog. And so they kind of watched me through these years work towards and then live out this dream of mine. And, it's just watching someone kind of evolve. And I got to have the experience of sharing that on my blog as it happened. And I think that was appealing to people. I think I was and am, I hope, approachable. And I think that comes through in my writing as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. You remind me, I first found you through your blog, and I was really attracted to your writing style as well, for that really personal and very heartfelt and intimate sort of way that you write. I liked it a lot.
Thanks.
So what would you do differently, knowing what you know now as writing as a profession?
Oh, what would I do differently as far as writing goes?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Just pick a couple.
It's almost like I don't want to sound like I'm complaining about it, because I pinch myself often that I get to do this, because now I do write for a living, although a lot of the writing is not the kind of writing that I love. It's more journalistic or writing a campground review or something like that. But the biggest block that came for me from writing eventually was the experience of being published, even though it was a dream for sure, and really overall a really wonderful experience. But I went into publishing super, super naive. And I'm so glad that I was, because I don't think that I would have tried otherwise, knowing how the cards are really stacked against. It's just so hard. It's not impossible. I'm proof of that. But it takes a freaking minor miracle, to get a book on the shelf. I'm so glad I didn't really know that, because I just moved forward. What holds me back now actually is contemplating what my second book should be about, is that I know so much about the publishing industry and how hard it is that it's almost paralyzing a little bit. And that I have a lot of voices in my head that used to never be there. And so the trick for me now is to learn how to write again for the joy of it without any expectation at all, which is something that I'm trying to do again, to take me back to that person, like that 5-year-old girl who used to write poems about the sunset, because that was just what I loved to do. I need to find that again. And yeah, as a writer, I think it's really hard to hold on to the magic of writing.
It has been super interesting for me to read on your blog about your experience with publishing, because, I hear these stories from friends, and It does sound like a really hard world. And you, I noticed, like did a total bootstrapping approach to marketing your book, I felt like, and, have had better results certainly than the other writers I know that haven't done that. But still, I heard that it was tough for you as well.
I loved it. It felt like a privilege, and it still does feel like a privilege because I know so many fabulous writers that don't have the same privilege for really no good reason. And so, yeah, I mean, I did everything that I could do, and I got out there and met readers, which is one of my favorite things to do. I met people that have read my blog for many years and who I've emailed, with and consider friends, but I've never met them in real life before. Yeah, but I think like at the end of it, because I did push for a really long time and I traveled all over and I did really whatever I could to spread the word about my book. And then I think it was such a sense of vulnerability for so long that I felt I had sort of the opposite reaction, like where I literally like moved to the middle of nowhere in the mountains and I I stopped writing on my blog. I didn't get on the internet very much. Like I had to kind of like close up again and refill and, reset and kind of build this sort of barrier between me and the world because I felt like it's a huge thing to write a memoir and just open yourself up like that. And then to know that people are reading it and to just, I'm like your classic introvert. I love like quiet time alone. So I also, love talking to people and I'm really passionate about it, but it drains me. So anyway, yeah, I mean, I feel a little bit like I'm coming out of it, but it's taken 2 years, 2 years to refill.
Yeah, I can only imagine the energy that would take to go out and talk so much and be so public and visible.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, that's the catch because that's what you want. Of course you want to be public and visible and for people to be reading and commenting about your book and all of that. And then it's also like, wow, it's just the world has taken your story and run with it and interpret it however they want and have their own thoughts and feelings about it. And, I've gotten a lot better at learning that that's just the way it is. I think that there's probably that learning curve for every new writer who's just published a book. If I publish another one, I'll definitely, know more going into it. But yeah, the whole thing has been quite a learning experience.
And so maybe you could tell us, a little bit about what's happened as you guys wrapped up your journey. How did you guys make the decision about when you stopped traveling and where you would go and how to start up your life again?
So we decided to have a baby and, I was lucky enough to get pregnant and we were in Mexico. We were living in Mexico, kind of. I mean, we had rented and we'd been there for maybe 6 months. We were renting an apartment and I thought that I would have the baby in Mexico and that we would just continue traveling. But that quickly became apparent that wasn't going to work. I had terrible morning sickness and, I was bedridden and miserable and I just wanted to go home. And I didn't even know where home was. I just needed to go someplace that felt more familiar. So because we had sold our house in Oregon, maybe we considered going back to Oregon, but I don't really think we did. But both of our families were in Ohio. And so we just bought plane tickets home to Ohio. No jobs, it didn't even matter. Like, I was just like, we just have to go. We have to do this. So I think we bought them maybe 6 weeks into the future. And Brian started applying for jobs. And then, it still shocks me to this day that he was offered a job. He interviewed over Skype and he was offered a job in Cincinnati, which is where we were flying to anyway. And so just like that, it happens. We had been so worried we figured it would take a long time for both of us. I never went looking for a traditional job, or I haven't yet, but, for Brian to find another 9-to-5 job because we had been traveling for 3 years, but he got it. The people that hired him were really interested in the trip. They did ask him, well, how do we know that you're not going to go traveling again? And he said, well, I have a baby coming and I don't know. I guess they took a chance on him, and he's still in the same job 3 years later. So yeah, or maybe even more than 3 years later. Oh man. Yeah. 3.5, almost 4. So that was kind of what decided it for us. So we went back to Cincinnati, and I was 4 months pregnant, and our daughter was born, and we stayed in Cincinnati for 2 years. But, we had dreamed we love the mountains. We knew we needed to live in the mountains. And so with another stroke of luck, Brian convinced or I guess he was able to work, remotely full time. And so we moved to the mountains in North Carolina, and he still has a job that he got when we first came back to the States. He just works from home now full time. So it's really kind of, it all worked out. Because it normally does, and if it doesn't, then something else happens, and that eventually becomes okay too. This is the end. It seems like the same lesson that I learned over and over again, which is just do what you need to do, and the rest will work itself out. As long as you're a hard and dedicated worker and someone who's willing to be flexible, and it's not always going to be perfect right away, but it will eventually be just fine.
Well, that seems like a great note to end on. And I want to wrap up our conversation with 3 questions for you.
All right.
The first is, what do you wish you had known before you took your leap?
I mean, just that it's going to turn out okay. That you don't need to spend all those nights wide awake worrying that you're destroying life. That it's going to be just fine, and it's going to be actually better than you ever would have dreamed.
And what was the most unexpected thing that came of your leap?
Just the fact that I truly get to write as a job, that I never went back to a 9-to-5 job, because this is all I ever wanted. So the fact that it's worked out I still can't believe it. I really can't.
And for someone who's thinking of doing something similar, what one piece of advice would you give them?
I mean, my advice is nearly always go for it, do it. I mean, don't do it blindly or without any planning. I mean, it does take some preparation. I think you have to feel as prepared as possible. You do have to have a nest egg, although people do it with almost nothing and they work it out too. But, for me, if you're not responsible for someone else, if there's not some true thing that's holding you back and this is what you want to do, I mean, why not?
Well, Kim, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
If people want to be in touch with you or to follow your projects or learn more about the book, how can they do that?
Well, the book is called The Yellow Envelope, and it's in bookstores and online. But, if you're going to get it, you should get it from your local bookstore. And my website's kimdinan.com. And there's a link to my blog and all of my social media accounts from the website.
Terrific. Well, thanks again for being on today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's show. Head on over to lisahoashi.com for the show notes for today's episode. Kim has shared some pictures of her and her husband on their travels, as well as their adorable daughter, as well as some of the things that inspired her own travels and some of the resources she's used for writing. If you're working on your own leap in life and you'd like some support, come on over to the Leap Like Me community on Facebook or reach out to me personally at my website, lisahoashi.com, or by sending me a message on Facebook or Instagram. If you're enjoying the show, I would love it if you left us a rating or review on iTunes. And if you've already done so, thank you so much. I value each and every one of those. I have a special update for all of you guys. As many of you may know, I'm getting ready right now for another major life leap, which is to have a second baby and welcome a son into our family. And that means that I am also getting ready to wrap up season 1 with a few more episodes. And then we'll be taking a break while I go on leave and also get set up for season 2 of Leap Like Me. I want to give you guys a heads up about all of this coming so that you know what to expect and also know that I'm going to be back. It's been so amazing to share this show with you and these stories, and I want to keep going. So know that I will be back and I will keep you updated on what's happening next. Have a great week. Thanks for listening to Leap Like Me.